All right, good evening, East Texas. Welcome back once again to East Texas Now. So we're joined here on the show by our White House correspondent, Jon Decker. Jon, good evening, sir.
Hi there, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us here. So, of course, today's topic of discussion is the indictment against former President Donald Trump. And I guess the first question for you here is, what's the response been in D.C. like since the indictment was handed up?
Well, let me give you the response coming from the former president first and foremost. He calls this a political persecution. Very long statement that he put out on his social media site, Truth Social. As far as other Republicans, they're out of town. They've had a break for the weekend, so a lot of them putting out statements on their social media, Twitter, Instagram, that type of thing, in which they're talking about how they continue to support the former president. They call this a political persecution, a political prosecution. The second in command in the Republican Party in the House, Steve Scalise, says that this is outrageous, just a one-word tweet that he put out. So most of the reaction, Jeremy, coming from the Republican side of the aisle, Democrats largely silent as it relates to this indictment handed up by the Manhattan grand jury.
So as far as the brass tacks of the indictment itself, is there any indications what the charges could actually be at the moment?
No, we know the nature of the indictment, but we don't know whether this is one charge or many charges. The reason being for that, Jeremy, this is a sealed indictment. It could be unsealed as early as tomorrow or maybe Monday of next week. We likely next week will see the former president in Manhattan for his court appearance, his first one, his arraignment in which he will indicate whether his plea is guilty or not guilty. We know it's going to be a not guilty plea. He will be processed during his appearance in Manhattan. Processed means fingerprinted, mugshot. He will not be handcuffed at any time during this process. He will then be released on his own recognizance, and he will go back to Florida where he lives. So that's what we expect over the course of the next week or so.
Now, just for like grand juries 101, why was the indictment sealed to begin with?
Well, I think that this is very typical for grand juries to issue a sealed indictment. They want to first notify the target of this indictment. They have now done so. And now, although we've seen this statement from Donald Trump, the fact of the matter is, as things stand today, the lawyers that represent the former president still don't know exactly what charge or charges will be brought forth by this grand jury. And so the statements are very vague coming from the lawyers that represent the former president. We know this all concerns those hush money payments to former adult film star Stormy Daniels and efforts to cover up those payments. But aside from that, we don't know the specific charge that will be leveled against the former president.
So I mean, of course, it's a bombshell announcement, historic in a lot of regards, but also it's one of, I believe, 4 investigations right now circling the former president. So does this indictment have any sort of effect or propulsive effect on the other investigations that are ongoing right now?
Well, it shouldn't. It shouldn't, because they're separate investigations, with separate issues that each of those investigations consist of. You talk about what's happening in Georgia, Fulton County, Georgia. The district attorney there needs to make a determination whether to bring any charges against any individuals, including former President Trump, in regards to alleged efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election in the state of Georgia. Then you have what's happening here in Washington, D.C. A grand jury has been impaneled that is looking into 2 things. January 6th, possible involvement of the former president and his allies associated with the attack on the Capitol. In addition to that, those classified documents that should not have been in the possession of former President Trump that were discovered by the FBI during the search of his home in August of last year. So on the surface, this should not impact those investigations. Having said that, however, the dam has been broken, so to speak, Jeremy, which means that now that precedent has now been set. A former president has been indicted. I think that may give a reason for these other investigations to realize that they will not be setting precedent if they too indict the former president for any additional charges.
Now, of course, not just former, but current candidate as well. So looking ahead to 2024, of course, former President Trump now under official indictment for a criminal charge or charges. So what does that do to the race in 2024?
Yeah, interesting. So Donald Trump, you may recall, a few weeks ago put out on social media the idea that he was going to be indicted by this same grand jury on Tuesday of last week. That did not happen. But putting that out on social media helped him raise over $1.5 million for his presidential campaign for 2024. He is already campaigning, sending out fundraising emails associated with the indictment that was just handed up a few hours ago. As far as the political ramifications, there are a few. In terms of securing the Republican nomination, I think it actually could help Donald Trump. It certainly secures his base. They have coalesced around him. We see this with many Republicans who are here in Washington in both the House and the Senate putting out statements supporting the former president. But the bigger question to me, Jeremy, is how does this help or hurt the former president in terms of the big prize? The big prize is not the Republican nomination.
Right.
The big prize for Donald Trump is winning the White House. And I personally don't see how this helps Donald Trump if he's trying to flip states that he lost in 2020. Does an indictment help Donald Trump in Pennsylvania? Does it help him in Georgia, in Arizona, in Michigan? I don't see how this helps him in any of those states, flipping them from blue, which they were in 2020, to red, which he wants them to be in 2024.
And I guess one more question, kind of an abstract question, I suppose. Just the implications. What are the implications of somebody under indictment, pending prosecution, running for president? What does that do to the nation's view of the presidency, of the process itself?
Well, that's up to individual voters to make that determination in terms of how they feel about a candidate for president, a candidate for a nomination who's been indicted, who's going through the legal process. But having said that, there is no bar in the Constitution to any individual running for federal office, whether it's Congress or the Senate or the presidency, while under indictment. And so this does not affect in any way Donald Trump's run for the White House, his run for the Republican nomination. And as we know, he's already said he's full steam ahead, regardless of the fact that he has been indicted. He is still pursuing that Republican nomination, and he is the front runner still for the Republican nomination in 2024.
All right, Jon, again, a big thanks for your time and expertise. Look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.